Spoilers! You've been warned.
So it's been a couple of weeks now since Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice hit the big screen, and overall I would say the reaction is mixed, at best. Now, reviews aren't everything. What matters is whether or not people enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this movie, then hey, good for you. Did I enjoy it? Actually, yes, in a way I think I did. Did I like it? Yeah, more than I thought I would. Do I think it's a good movie? God, no. This is not a good movie. This movie's just full of problems. Honestly, though, should we really be surprised by this? Really, if you look at what's on offer here, as well as everything leading up to it, is it really any wonder that what we got is this big of a mess? And while I don't think the movie deserves some of the severe hate it's been getting, I'm not all that surprised by the critics' response. So, in typical internet fashion, here's a list of reasons why I think Batman v Superman's failure really shouldn't come as that big of a surprise. So first off, I want to address the Zack Snyder in the room, just to get this one out of the way. Let me open here by saying I am definitely not his biggest fan. In fact, I don't even like the two good Zack Snyder movies. The main reason why is that in majority of his films, Snyder tends to sacrifice character and story for cool visuals. As a result, to me, his characters end up coming across as one-dimensional, cartoonish. Now, the man is probably the best in the business at action and visuals, but that doesn't automatically make him a visionary director, especially when most of his visuals are just there for the sake of being there. Now, you don't necessarily need subtlety when handling comic book superheroes who have a long history of melodramatics, but one thing I definitely think is necessary for this genre is the ability to focus on the characters' dynamics and internal conflicts. What has always made the superhero genre particularly interesting, I'm mostly talking comics here, is that they are character-driven stories, be it the heroes or the villains. This is something, I think anyway, that Zack Snyder is not good at. This makes him a poor choice for director since these types of films need someone who is good at character-driven storytelling as well as visuals. I can appreciate Snyder's attempts at this, but with the way Snyder presents it within the film, it ultimately ends up falling flat because he mischaracterizes them or just glosses over important character development in other scenes. Batman's decision to kill Superman is undermined by the fact Batman is already straight up murdering people with guns in the movie, which again would be interesting to explore with this new, darker, more brutal Batman, but no one ever talks about it or brings it up. Superman's inner conflict about whether or not he should be Superman comes across in the movie like he's just bitching and moaning about how no one appreciates what he does. And his reasons for not liking Batman is he doesn't like that people are afraid of Batman because he kills people and causes property damage and acts outside of the law and the government. Exactly like he does. Essentially, Batman and Superman are both just giant hypocrites who come across as schoolyard bullies arguing over who's king of the playground. There are so many moments like this in the film that feel like they're going somewhere, but amount to nothing because Snyder is actively pushing aside story and character just so he can get to his next cool shot. Which brings me to a half-assed segue to my next point. It's not just the visuals that Snyder and WB seem to have pushed aside the story for, as they consistently cram in as much fan service and foreshadowing as possible. I understand this is all going to pay off in the next few movies, I hope. It's fine when films like this have little Easter eggs in the background, because they aren't part of the main story or overly distracting, but when you insert huge scenes into the middle of your film, there needs to be some kind of impact or payoff to the plot later, which this film doesn't have. When I watched this film with my girlfriend, she had to go to the bathroom during the Nightmare in the Flash sequence, and when she came back, she was still able to follow the rest of the movie. I didn't have to explain anything about what was happening because it didn't affect what was happening, making them entirely pointless and therefore should not be in the movie, while it seems important scenes were left on the cutting room floor, which has become evident since every time someone brings up a plot hole to Zack Snyder, he starts talking about some deleted scene that they got rid of because the movie was too long. If you have deliberately left out important scenes that explain character motivation or plot holes for the sake of leaving in things that are pure setup and have no impact, then I'm afraid you have failed. I'm probably coming off a little harsh here, which is unfair since the people involved should be commemorated for trying to fit so much in just 2 hours. Unfortunately, this has also been their major downfall, which brings me to... This film is probably a prime example of filmmakers overextending themselves, since it is quite clearly two movies that have been Frankenstein together in an attempt to make a coherent film. But it's not just the fact this clearly should be two movies that holds BVS back from reaching its true potential, but also that it is trying to do the job of at least 4 movies. First, they have to set up conflict between Batman and Superman, which is the real reason we all bought tickets to see this thing. They also have to do all the Justice League stuff. They have to re-establish Batman so that they can differentiate him from the other versions, and also have to be a sequel to Man of Steel and address all the problems with that movie. There are so many great things going on in this film, it's hard to tell the difference between the main plot and the subplot to the point where the film starts to feel unfocused, making all these elements that would be great separately become muddled, convoluted, and at times confusing and incoherent, and ultimately end up having a huge negative effect on the story you're trying to tell, because you haven't actually figured out which story you're trying to tell yet. If you haven't figured that out, then how could you possibly have anything interesting to say? It is very likely that I wrote that last line as another attempt at a segue, but anyway, I think Kevin Smith said it best when he talked about how this film doesn't really have any moral to it. There is no big lesson or thematic idea behind the film, yet clearly Snyder seems to think that there is. He soaks his film in religious imagery to the point where he paints both Batman and Superman as Jesus. The film doesn't actually have anything to say about religion or belief, other than maybe that you should be wary of other people's beliefs because it makes them do crazy things. It's a pretty shit message, especially since it kinda contradicts the only other possible lesson of don't judge people before you know them or based on where they come from, which only exists in the movie if you solely focus on the Batman stuff. It looks like at one point they're gonna have some serious discussion about whether or not the world needs a Superman, but instead they literally blow up this plot point and then forget about it. The actual fight between Batman and Superman is probably the best example of this film having nothing interesting to say but thinking it does. In this graphic novel, when Batman and Superman finally fight, Superman operates solely under the government's supervision. Batman, who has seen his city overrun with crime and violence, believes that the system is broken and that the only real path to justice and helping humanity is to act outside of the government and the law. This gives the fight some much needed emotional charge as both men fight for their own political agenda that gives it a message of just an average man standing up against a repressive, superpowered government. The fight in Batman vs Superman has none of this. Superman only turns up to fight because he's being blackmailed into it. Batman is only fighting because he just straight up wants to kill Superman because he hates him. This isn't a battle of political ideals. It's a juvenile punch-up that turns into Batman beating up Superman for about 10 minutes. Was it awesome to see and enjoyable to watch? Fuck yeah! Did it amount to anything or actually matter in the grand scheme of things? No, not really, no. Then we found out Doomsday is in it, and it becomes quite clear that he's decided to throw in Superman's most famous story, that being the death of Superman. That comic worked because Superman had been around for years, and killing him was such a huge shock to the system, whereas here, this is a new Superman who I am yet to care about, so killing him doesn't have any impact since this is only his second film. He's just shoving in as much as he possibly can to appease fans, whilst also childishly reprimanding anyone who doesn't like what he's doing. Snyder so clearly doesn't understand these characters or what makes them great. I mean, why else would he shoot CIA agent Jimmy Olsen in the head and then call it an Easter egg? Why else would he refer to the tragic death of Robin, which is akin to a father losing a son, as a fun little journey? Why else would he have Lex Luthor blow up Mercy Graves, one of his most trusted and badass bodyguards? Snyder gives us his interpretations of the characters, and while I'm all for new interpretations, they still have to be true to the essence of those characters, of which Snyder's are not. How can a movie possibly live up to all the hype and expectations surrounding it when the people in charge just don't get it nor seem to want to? Of course this film is going to fail. How can it not, with all of this stacked against it? Actually, that's a good place to end. Sorry, I kind of went on a bit of a rant there about Zack Snyder, which I already did at the start. Anyway, this is just my opinion.
Thank you for watching the show. If you enjoyed, please let me know. You can like and share, subscribe if you dare, and please leave a comment below.